Bam, that was energetic. I like that. Yo, what's up? It's been a minute since I've done any kind of tutorials, so today is the day where I'm going to start with doing tutorials again. And what better to do a tutorial about than time lapses? And not just any kind of time lapses, but the godmother of time lapses itself, and that is a day to night time lapse. So we are on my rooftop right now. We have the EOS R5 set up. So I'm going to show you how to set up the camera for a day to night time lapse, as well as show you the whole process of doing everything in post to get the best results possible. So let's take the camera, get up there, and I'll show you how to do a time lapse. My name is Damien Cooper and welcome to Monkey Pixel. So step number one is obviously finding a really nice spot you can film your time lapse at, and to also secure your camera because it's going to be there for a little while. And right here is not the perfect space for us because the tripod legs spread out too widely, so we can't use this tripod. So we need to improvise and find ourselves a smaller tripod. So luckily we are prepared and we have a smaller tripod for us to use. And that is this one, and that should be secure enough to hold the Canon EOS R5. We just need to set it up real quick. I don't know how high my confidence level is right now in this, but we don't have anything better, so this needs to do. And I'll just hope there won't be a lot of wind tonight. So overall, there's various kind of different cameras we can shoot time lapses on. Actually, the C70 we're filming the B-roll on right now is capable of shooting time lapses, as well as most cinema cameras, GoPros, or any camera basically. But I think the best results will always come from a DSLR or a DSLM, because now we can actually shoot raw photos and stitch our time lapse together afterwards in post. And that way we get the highest quality, the highest resolution, as well as the most dynamic range. So the first thing we need to do is set up our camera. And there's two different ways we can go about it. Number one is the built-in time-lapse feature, and a lot of modern cameras have this feature. And when it needs to be quick and dirty, that is actually a really cool way, because then the camera shoots a time-lapse itself, stitching together the photos, and then renders out a 4K, or in that case even an 8K video file. And that mostly does a really good job, but it doesn't really give us a lot of flexibility in post. So we're going the most quality way and shooting intervals of raw photos ourselves. Alright, so on the EOS R, in order to set up the time-lapse mode, we need to get rid of C-Lock because none of these can function together. The EOS R5 has a intervalometer built in, which is really handy. A lot of cameras don't, and if they don't, you need an external intervalometer to shoot pictures at a certain time frame over a couple of hours. So, since this time-lapse is going to run for a couple of hours at least, we have 7:30 p.m. right now, and sunset will be in about an hour. But overall, you're looking at about 4 hours of shooting time-lapses. So you don't want to use an interval that is too close together and too short on time. So I think about 15 to 20 seconds for a day-to-night or night-to-day time-lapse is actually the sweet spot. When it comes to the number of shots, I usually don't predefine anything, and I just use the highest amount so that it shoots until the battery dies or until I stop it manually. So all we need to do now is find the perfect settings for the day setup as well as for later that night. And that is the tricky part. So what I usually go with is I use an aperture of around 8, and I put the camera into aperture priority. So that means that the aperture stays constantly the same and the camera will adjust its setting accordingly to what you want to do. So in this case, we're going to have a really short shutter right now because it's still very bright outside. But during the nighttime, when the camera needs more light to expose, it'll actually lengthen the exposure time, so we get a little bit of a long exposure during the night. So when it comes to the ISO, I put it to 400 to give us a little bit of room to work with when it's going to be pitch dark at night. Because remember, we shot at an interval of 15 seconds. So if we don't have enough light during the night, when we are shooting at an aperture of 8 with an ISO 100, then the camera might expose for longer than 15 seconds to get a clear image, and then our time lapse will be messed up. So that's one thing that we don't want to do. So after we found a nice framing for our time lapse, there's one really important step. You focus on wherever you want the focus to be, and then you switch your lens to manual focus, because one thing we really don't want to mess up our time lapse is a constant changing of focus fields, and that could happen with various kind of situations. So remember, always put the camera into manual focusing mode. Alright, and that's it. Now the camera shoots for as long as we leave it or until the battery runs out. So again, we started at 7:30 and I will see you later in about 3 to 4 hours. Alright, it's been 4 hours, it's 11:30 right now. The camera is even still recording up there. So we didn't run out of battery, which is a good thing. So right now I'm going to take the camera down, stop the recording, and then I will see you tomorrow in the studio, and then I'll show you how we stitch everything together in post so that we end up with a nice day to night time lapse. After we let our camera shoot for 4 hours yesterday, all we need to do today is take all of our pictures and import them into our photo editor of choice. There's another way to go about it and import all of these pictures directly into our video editor, but that would make too much sense because we shot raw and we want to get the full capability of editing these raw pictures to get the best dynamic range and the best looking time lapse out of it. So my favorite editor of choice is Adobe Lightroom, and that is what we're using right now. So importing all these pictures it is. After importing all of our pictures successfully, which is 531 by the way, we just start editing those. So what I do is obviously use one of our presets that you can shop in our online store. The link is in the description below. Just to get the most out of all of our pictures, especially when it comes to blown out parts or just crushed blacks. We want to raise the shadows a little bit and just get the most dynamic range out of our time lapse, because we have a huge spectrum of different kind of light situations, because we started at day and then we went all the way down to night. So we take one of these pictures, and then what I like to do is just add a preset. And I think for this one, which one works pretty well? Bright Babes from our City Vibe preset actually looks pretty decent. Let's just adjust the white balance a little bit and maybe the saturation in the blacks. So I think that looks actually pretty good for our day shots. So I copy all of the settings right now, then I will apply them to all 531 pictures. Or not? Okay, are you sure you want to continue? Yes, 531 photos. So this naturally takes a little bit, so I'll talk to you when this is done. So this took a little while. What will take even longer is exporting all of these pictures, and we will export them in JPEG at the highest quality because we want the most latitude in our time lapse after. So this will very well take about half an hour, but it will be worth it. So half an hour later, we have exported all of our JPEGs, and now we just need to open our editor of choice, and mine is always Final Cut Pro 10. So let's start a new project, and well, let's do it 8K because we can, and that gives us the biggest resolution, so we can zoom in, we can crop later if you want to use that time lapse in any of our videos. 8K time lapse. So we put it into 25 frames so that we can easily use it in all of our projects, because all of the projects that I'm doing, at least when I'm in Europe, is 25 frames. And hit OK. So what we need to do now is import all of our footage and just throw them onto our timeline. So let's take all of our finally edited pictures and just throw them in here. Next up, what we want to do is, since the aspect ratios of shooting pictures is different than our 8K timeline, which is in a 16:9 format, we need to select all of our images and just tell our editor that we want them to fill the entire screen rather than be cropped on the sides. And that I can do right here. That looks decent. The last thing we need to do now is change the duration of our pictures, because we want every picture to be exactly 1 frame long. In Final Cut, the way to do it is press Ctrl D and then put in 1 and press enter. So now all of the pictures are exactly 1 frame long. So that gives us a total of a 20-second time lapse. Beware, over 500 pictures in an 8K timeline takes a huge toll on your computer. So if your computer can't handle this, rather go with a 4K timeline, and that is totally sufficient. But for the sake of the video, I just wanted to do it in 8K. So all we need to do now is just export the video like we would export any other video, and then wait for however long it takes, and then we should have a really nice and crisp day to night time lapse. 8K time lapse and save. All we need to do now is wait. So now if you add a little bit of a zoom in keyframe as well as some sound effects that I actually got on Epidemic Sound, and the link to that is also down in the description below. This is where I get all my sound effects as well as all my music for this YouTube channel. Then you'll end up with a really nice 8K time lapse. But my computer couldn't even play back the 8K file, so I actually did it again in 4K, and I think 4K is totally sufficient and it still gives you great quality. Obviously, there's more steps we can take to even better this time lapse, like keyframe, a little bit of a color grading, if we wanted to have more of an accurate white balance and shifting from the day to the night. There's also other things we could still do with this, but I think this already took way too long, and this gives us a really nice result. So I hope you liked this little tutorial, and if you drop a comment down in the description below saying that you actually enjoyed that, then I can make more of these tutorials happen in the near future. And if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up because it really helps the channel grow. Subscribe to see more, and I hope to see you on the next one.